Hello, my name is Trevor, and today we're going to be diving back into Hyperborea 3rd Edition and taking a look at the fighter and all of its subclasses. So, get ready to crush your enemies and see them driven before you, today on Rolling with Advantage. Today, as we take a look at the fighter, the things that we're going to do is we take a look at this class and also all the subclasses. We're going to take a look at the attributes, also some things that I might recommend as far as stat-wise, and we're also going to take a look at each of their abilities and what makes them unique. Now, a lot of these classes will overlap abilities, so if I go over an ability once, I'll just mention, hey, this class also has it as well, and kind of move through it for the sake of brevity. So as we go through the fighter, what we're going to take a look at is attributes requirement. You only need a strength of 9. Now, with this subclass, and with every fighting subclass, I will say that Constitution is probably a stat you want to have pretty high as well, just depending on however you roll. There are some ways that when you're rolling stats, you can kind of move points around. So I would highly recommend, Strength and then Constitution. Unless you want to try to make some type of archer, you could as well and put some points into Dexterity. So with that, that's all you need for the fighter. For stats, they get D10 hit points. They can use any weapon, armor, or shield. Now, a lot of people overlook that and go, well, of course he can. But in a game where you have all these random loot tables for loot and things, which I use a lot, I think it's pretty cool to have a character that no matter what they find, they can pick up and use. It's pretty cool. It just depends on how your table runs loot. I randomly generate all of my loot, so there are times they'll find something and say, hey, I can't use it, I'll trade. But having a character that's like, hey, I wasn't planning on using a magic axe, but we found one, is pretty cool. The other thing, too, is that with saving throws, they get a bonus to death and transformation. Death comes up a lot, and I would say that's probably, from what I've seen in the game that I've played so far, probably the most important. It's not just a saving throw versus things that are, a lot of times, diseases and things like that is a death saving throw. So having that is really, really good. Extraordinary is a class ability that we're going to see with the fighter and with several of the other subclasses as well. What this allows you to do is get a plus 8% chance to perform an extraordinary feat of strength, like breaking chains or knocking down a door or something of that nature. That's a pretty standard fighter subclass ability. I think most of them have that. Just be sure, when you look at this, always be thinking that, because if you have a high enough strength and then you get a base percentage and then you get another 8 on top of that, I've actually saw a barbarian who actually landed this several times in a row to break manacles and things of that nature. So don't overlook this if you're playing it. Always be looking for opportunities to kind of show off the guns, and see what you can pull off. Heroic fighting is the fighter ability that we can get excited about. To smite multiple foes when combating opponents of 1 hit die or less, double normal melee attacks per round, from 2 and then 1 or 3 and then 1 if wielding a mastered weapon. The dramatic attack could be effective as a single devastating swing or lunge that bursts through multiple foes. Okay. You would be surprised how often this comes up. A lot of times you're fighting a horde of skeletons or a horde of little things, and the fighter can just go off and kill a lot of things at once. It is a great moment for the fighter to be able to see a target-rich environment that he can go and just kind of like whirlwind his blade around and kill everything. And I would tell DMs as well, if you have a fighter in your party, give them opportunities to show off this ability. Don't always put them up against one giant monster. Put a lot of little things in there that they can just murder. It really enhances the feel of the character. And that is kind of a generic tip I give to DMs. Look at the abilities that your characters are bringing to the table and present opportunities for them to use those. Now, they may not see the opportunity, may not use it, but present the opportunity. So heroic fighting is extremely good. Just make sure that DMs out there don't just say, oh, he's got it, now we're never going to see little things anymore because it's just too good. It's a great ability. Let them use it. The next thing we're going to take a look at is weapon mastery. Now, they actually get to choose 2 weapons at level 1 to be a master of, which is kind of unique to this game. Not everybody gets 2, which is pretty cool because he can choose like, hey, I want to have my long sword and then a ranged option like a bow or something of that nature. And having the mastery ability of a weapon is important because it increases your attack rate. It also makes you easier to hit things, also does more damage. It's a really, really, really good ability. Now, At 4th and 8th and 12th level, they get Grand Mastery. With a weapon mastery is gained, fighters may elect to intensify their training with an already mastered weapon. It basically goes from a +1 to a +2 to hit, and +1 to damage to +2, and it gains an increased attack rate. A fighter may achieve Grand Mastery, but with one weapon. So that is a really, really big deal, to have something that you're just insanely good at. And then, of course, at 6th level, they can start getting henchmen. At 7th level, they become a melee expert. A fighter's standard melee attack rate is improved from 1 to 1 to 3 to 2. What that means is you attack 3 times in one round, 2 times in the next. It's kind of like how they're comboing off. And then, of course, they have at 9th level, they get a lordship. Now, one thing to take a look at, too, when you're taking a look at the experience tables here, is that everybody in this game has like different experience charts, so not everyone will level at the same pace. You'll see that some classes are slower to level than others. The fighter levels rather quickly compared to all the other fighter subclasses. So not only is he very, very good at fighting, but he's actually going to be leveling up. Like it's typical to see a fighter maybe a half a level or a level ahead of his counterparts, which kind of gives him a leg up on the competition in a way. Also, do note that their fighting ability goes up every single level, which is a really, really big deal. It's going to be able to make sure that they hit more attacks. There's nothing more frustrating for a fighter than to not be able to hit. So the fact that they can level fast, they're going to be able to kind of keep up with the difficulty of the game as they're landing all of their attacks. So overall, fighter is a solid class, and I think it'll be a lot of fun to play. All right, so now let's take a look at the 7 subclasses that the fighter has. For the subclasses, we have barbarian, berserker, cataphract, huntsman, paladin, ranger, and warlock. Now, I've been fortunate enough to see most of these at the table. A couple of them I haven't yet, but I'm still very excited about it. And I'll kind of give you some tidbits that I've seen from the table, and then some of these will be more hypotheticals because I haven't actually seen it at the table yet. So first off, we're going to take a look at is the barbarian, which is the class that I've seen at the table the most because, hey, who doesn't want to play Conan? So let's dive in and take a look at the barbarian. As we talk about the barbarian, one thing to take a note is that depending on how you're rolling stats, there's a lot of different ways to do it in this game. This may be a class that is extremely hard to get into. You need a 13 strength, 13 dex, and 13 constitution. The way that I roll the stats, I have them like their first roll is their strength, their second roll is their dex, and so on. So it's a little hard to get into the barbarian. There are ways, and whenever you're rolling stats, to kind of switch some things around. Just talk to your DM and just see what it's going to be like. If you really want to play a barbarian, maybe they can work with you because some of the requirements of playing this are a little tough. But for good reason, because a barbarian should be a massive physical specimen, so they should have these stats. Also, they do get a hit die of D12, which is make them some of the beefier characters in the game. They also get the ability to use any armor, any shield, and they can favor any weapon. They also get +2 bonuses to all saves, which is extremely good. There's only a handful of characters, I think, in the game that get that, a +2 to just everything, and that's very, very good. They also gain the ability to be agile. They get a +1 to their AC when unarmored and unencumbered, though a shield is allowed. I still feel it's probably better to wear armor depending on the situation, but I have seen characters who are like, oh, I'm going straight Conan, I'm not going to wear any armor. And it does create a a dangerous play style that's kind of fun to have at the table. They also have alertness. They get a reduce by -1 on a d6 roll for the party's chance to be surprised. That is an ability that DMs need to make sure that they kind of incorporate. Not everyone kind of uses those rules, but you should and really try to find a situation for the barbarian to kind of show off that ability. The other side of that is also the ambusher ability. When traversing the wilds alone or with others like ability, the barbarian's base surprise chance increases by 1 on a d6 roll. Furthermore, when outdoors, even an untrained party's chance to surprise increases by +1 if the barbarian positions and prepares them accordingly. We actually got to use this in our Heroes of Hyperborea campaign. It was really cool to see Dracon, our barbarian, kind of help the party kind of maneuver through the woods to sneak up on their prey. It was a pretty cool moment, and be sure that it's one of those things that helps the barbarian feel like the because they're kind of like a warrior ranger mix kind of in a way. So make sure that they can use those types of abilities. They're very good at climbing. They can also draw poison out and spit the poison out. This is actually an ability that a lot of people forget they have, and it's actually very, very good because poison in this game is extremely deadly. So I highly recommend, if you're playing a barbarian, make sure just like write on a sticky note off the side, I can do something about poisons. It's a button a lot of times. It won't come up often, but when it does, you're like, oh wait, I can do something for that. They also get the extraordinary ability, which we saw with the fighter. We've already talked about hardy. Horsemanship. They're also very, very good at being on horses, and they're very good at and even the most stubborn mounts submit to the barbarian's will. So in a lot of games we may not get to mounted combat, but it is a good thing that they have that in their back pocket. Leap is another great ability about the barbarian. Their mighty thews enable leaps of 25 feet or greater if they're unencumbered. So that's very, very cool, and kind of goes with that. I keep going back to Conan because I feel like it is just the classic look of the barbarian. But we also see it in games like Diablo and things like that. The barbarian has the massive leap. It's very, very on brand. They also get a massive ability here called Move Silently. They're very, very adept at moving silently through the woods or through the dungeons and things, so that's very, very good. They can run extremely fast. They can sense magic, which is super cool. And probably my favorite thing about the barbarian is they have this ability that they don't trust sorcery. And it kind of, I love this ability because it basically gives you a cue on how to roleplay a barbarian, that they don't like magic. They don't trust magic. And the fact that they can sense it and they don't like it really kind of gives us a cool idea of how to play the character. They also get the ability to track, and it's extremely good. It's a 10 in 12 chance. So on a D12, you just don't roll a 1 or a 2. That's really, really, really good. So the barbarian is a great ranger-esque character that also deals a ton of damage, has a lot of abilities to kind of move around. A lot of fun, and they can also take an absolute beating. So I think Barbarian is probably, I don't like to tier it, but I would say it's one of my favorite things to see at the party, just because it's such a good iconic class to see. Barbarian is a ton of fun. If it's your first time playing Hyperborea, go for Barbarian, go for Conan. It's a lot of fun to play. Of course, they also get, the weapon mastery that all of the fighter subclasses get. They get to pick weapons they're really good at. They pick up wilderness survival, which gives them hunting and trapping and fishing and boating and all of those things. And of course, later on, we see that they get to enlist henchmen. They become a melee expert at the 7th level, like the fighter does. And of course, they get the lordship at level 9, which is going to be kind of a standard thing that we're going to see. So I highly recommend, if you have the stats to play a barbarian, take a look at playing them. They're a lot of fun, and they also bring a lot of really good tools to the party if you're doing any type of wilderness game, which if you're playing in Hyperborea, you're going to be playing a lot of wilderness. So it is a raw savage world, so a barbarian is just a perfect class to have into a party. So the berserker is the hardest class in the game to play based off of the attribute requirements. You need a 15 strength and a 15 constitution. So depending on how you're rolling stats, that may be extremely difficult to do. They are very, very powerful, and they also have a baked-in weakness, which I love. So basically, before we get into that, just know that they can use any armor, any shield, any weapon. They get a +2 bonus to all their saves, so they have the hardy ability like the barbarian. And they also have this ability, as we go into, called Berserk Rage. Now, the furious battle lust and feral madness unleashed, a rage may be entered any time during battle, though it must often be witnessed when the berserker's blood has been drawn. Okay, so 1 through 4th levels, they can rage once per day. Then after that, they can go, 2 times a day, all the way up to 3 times a day once you hit level 9. Now, it equals a number of rounds equal to your constitution score, so it lasts for a while. Now, the following benefits and drawbacks apply. Now, while you're berserking, your attack rate is increased, so it goes from 2 to 1, or if you're the master of a weapon, it's 5-2. So if you have an axe or a 2-handed sword, you're attacking 5 times, and then 2 times, and then 5 times, which is insanity. And they also get a bonus +2 to hit and damage on all melee attacks. They're immune to normal fire. They get their frightening aspects, morale checks are -2. They get a hit point burst. They have a refusal to fall. They can fight as low as -3 hit points. They can Here's the drawback. They have a refusal to surrender, which you think, oh, of course, that's so on brand. But what if you need to run away? The berserker won't. So they cannot yield, retreat, or withdraw from melee once the rage has begun. Neither can the berserker take actions unrelated to battle and bloodshed. So here's the thing. What that means is that you can't like reposition or try to go help a friend that's dying or anything like that. He's like, no, I am going to keep stabbing things with my sword or my axe until everything is dead at the table. It's a lot of fun to play. It can be dangerous, and I love the boom or bust abilities of this game. Like, having things that are extremely powerful but may also kind of screw you at the end. I love this ability. So the other thing that we see with this ability is you have unbreakable willpower. You're immune to fear, charm, and sorcery, which is very, very good. You also are uncontrollable. Once all enemy combats have been vanquished, the berserker continues to attack or rend slain enemy forms until the rage duration ends. However, there is a 1 in 8 chance the berserker continues attacking any living creature within 30 feet, including allies, for 1d6 rounds before all good sense is regained. It's almost like you're going to need somebody on like berserker duty, like, oh no, the berserker, he's still charging us. We need to like knock him out or root him or charm him or something. You're going to have to do something to kind of, until the rage abates. It's very, very cool. They get the climb, the leap, and the extraordinary ability like we've seen with the barbarian. Thick skin. This is also really cool. Flesh, not unlike the hide of a bull, which toughens over time. The berserker has natural AC 8 at first level, 7 at third level, and so on. So there's actually a natural AC as part of their progression as it goes. Their fighting ability also goes up 1 every time, and they also have hit dice D12 equal to barbarian. So they can absolutely take a beating, and they will. I mean, it's not uncommon for battle to end and the berserker is just a bloody mess. And you're like, is that his blood? Is it someone else's blood? It's all kind of mixed. That's kind of the style of the berserker. The other cool thing is at 7th level, they get bestial form. The berserker is blessed by a deity or spirit with the ability to transmogrify into a semi-human bipedal shape whilst in berserk rage. The bestial form assumed is one typically associated with the berserker's culture or ancestry. Basically, they get bigger, they start recovering their hit points, they get these bestial attacks. It's very, very cool. And so, like I said, I love this class. It's dangerous to play, but I think it is also, what better class to bring to a dangerous, savage world of Hyperborea than a berserker. So I think it's a great class to include. All right, so next, let's take a look at the cataphract. Now, I just want to pause and say, if there is one piece of art that captures Hyperborea for me, it's the cataphract art. You've got a Moor on a horse with a sword and a ray gun in his hand. I mean, that just captures this like fantasy / weird fiction of Hyperborea. So I think it's just perfect. So this is a character where you kind of need a lot of decent stats. It's not as like hard to get into this as you would like a barbarian or a berserker. And they are very, very good on a horse. However, what we'll see is they are also just good off of a horse as well. Now, I will say, if you are running a game and you have a cataphract, you would be doing them a huge disservice to never let them have mounted combat. So it's one of those things, like if you have this in your group, try to have situations where they'll be on a horse. But at the same time, they're not completely useless off of a horse either. They're really, really good. All right, so what we do is we take a look at the attributes. They need a strength of 9, dex 9, wisdom 9, charisma 9. Now, that means they need pretty good stats across the board. Even though constitution isn't listed there, I still think they need good constitution. They get a d10 hit points, which is a little less than the berserker and the barbarian. They can use any armor, shield, or weapon. They get a +2 bonus to death and transformation. And they get the extraordinary ability like we've seen before. Now, honor. Cataphracts who operate as knights must be lawful good, lawful evil, or neutral lawful, serving as a lord, monarch, etc. Enjoy all the political and social benefits derived therefrom. In fact, people of similar affiliation are expected to accommodate the knights to the best of their ability. So, a lot of people have an issue with the word cataphract because they're not used to it. But if you say knight, they're like, oh, I understand that. So this is kind of an idea that, just think the whole honor and code and loyalty and all those types of things. So those words are kind of interchangeable. But I like cataphract. I think it's cool. All right, so they have to be. They're basically they're knights. They have a code. They will be treated as such as they move around the country. People will recognize. Oh, it's a lordly knight kind of thing. They have this whole honor bound thing about them. They have the horsemanship, which we saw with the barbarian, and they also get this thing called mounted charge, a thunderous mounted onset, both feared and renowned. The cataphract's lance charge from horseback or camelback is at +2 to the attack roll, or +3 versus footman, and treble damage dice. Now, I will be the first to admit, I didn't know what treble was until I read this. It's not a word I've heard very often. It simply means triple. But hey, I love the fact that I learn new words in games. So you triple or treble the damage dice, which is very, very cool. So that's a reason why you want to make sure that give your knights and cataphracts and things, give them the chance to use their horse. Shield sacrifice, they get some cool abilities. To sacrifice a shield and escape harm from a single melee blow. When wielding a shield in combat, if the cataphract is struck by a melee blow, the player may opt to announce a shield sacrifice to avoid damage. However, the shield is destroyed by the blow. If the shield is magical, it has a chance in 8 to survive destruction equal to the shield's bonus. +1 shield has a 1 in 8 chance. This ability cannot be used after damage is rolled and usable but once per day, regardless of results. Okay. So a lot of people say, gee, I don't know if I want to sacrifice a shield. Let me tell you. In this game, you can generally tell when you're about to get hit by something very, very big and very, very hard. And having this ability to say, I don't know how much damage it's going to be, it just feels like it's going to be a lot of damage. This can absolutely be huge, and it's not that hard if you've got a horse to carry an extra shield around. So I think this is a fantastic ability. You just never know when you might need to have a get-out-of-jail-free card, so I think it's great. Skillful Defender. To avail armor to its utmost when clad in medium or heavy armor, the cataphract gains a +1 bonus from 1 to 6 levels and +2 from 7 to 12. So if you have a character here who can wear heavy armor, has a shield, is a skillful defender, their AC can get out of hand. In a good way. They're the armor-clad knight. They're going to be very hard to hit. That's very, very good. They pick up the weapon mastery. Now, the thing that's interesting with this, they get the lance weapon mastery and one other weapon. So I like the fact that they baked in, you don't, like, if you think, oh, well, if I'm going to be playing on a horse, I have to take lance, they give that to you automatically. It's a really good, clever design to make sure that you're good at being on a horse, but you're also good off the horse as well. So I love the fact that they gave that to them. They get the enlist henchman at 6, like we've seen. They get the melee expert at 7th and lordship at 9. That's things we've seen across the board. All right, fighting ability goes up by 1 every time they level, and they get the D10 hit points. So this is a very, very good class. I would play this and say, you know what, I'm going to use the horse stuff. If I get it, great. But I just want to play for Skillful Defender and Shield Sacrifice. That's really, really good. Oh, I also forgot to mention that they're immune to the effects of magically induced fear. That's really, really good. So I love defensive characters, so I would want to play this just for Shield Sacrifice and Skillful Defender. Like, I really like those two abilities. So, and I just think it'd be a lot of fun to play. So Cataphract, I think, is great. And I haven't seen one of these at the table yet, but I am hoping one day soon we'll get a Cataphract. He looked really, really fun. All right, next let's dive into the huntsman. All right, I love a huntsman. I've had one at the table before. They have a lot of things that they need. They need strength and dex and wisdom and charisma, but they're all relatively low. 9 strength, 9 dex, 9 wisdom, 12 charisma. D10 hit points. They cannot use heavy armor. It's just light and medium. You got to think of this as there is a ranger, but there's almost like 2 rangers in this game. There's the huntsman and there's the actual ranger. They get a death bonus to death saving throws and also to transformation. They get the alertness ability and the ambusher and the climb ability that we all saw from the barbarian. What they also get, though, is while they get the extraordinary thing that we've seen, but they also get harvest venom. They can extract venom snacks from snakes, spiders, and insects and the like, should the opportunity present itself. Huntsmen learn to dissect venomous creatures. This skill is performed 9 and 12. If a 12 is rolled a mishap, and the huntsman is exposed to the poisonous find. So basically they have a way to harvest poisons to be used for their weapons, which I think is very, very cool. They also have the ability to hide, move silently, but they also get this predator ability. Trained from earliest youth to hunt and kill animals both fleet and robust, The huntsman inflicts +1 HP damage per level of experience when combating normal and giant-sized animals, amphibians, birds, and things of that nature. Dinosaurs, fish, insects, mammals, and reptiles. Now, this does not apply to constructs, daemons, elementals, fungi, giants, humanoids, magical beasts, molds, oozes, and otherworldly alien beings. Okay. When used in concert with a successful hide attempt, the initial attack roll is made at a +4. Alright, so here's my take on this. This is much better than you think it is. This is a world filled with a lot of nasty, giant-sized animals. So this actually comes up fairly often. There's going to be certain things you fight, undead or whatnot, that you're just not going to run into this, but you'll be surprised how often this comes up. And +1 damage per level of experience. Like, let's just say you have a bow or something of that nature, and you can get a couple attacks around, and you're dealing an extra, let's say you're level 3, you're getting an extra 3 damage every time you hit something. That really adds up. So that's a really, really good ability. All right, now, they have this whole thing here on Subdue Animal because the huntsman is the pet class. They have all these other cool things that it can do, but it's also all about taming and soothing an animal. Not magical, it has to be normal. But basically they have all these rules here, which is actually not that hard to pull off of, basically, what is it that you can tame, with a wolf or a hyena or a bear or whatever, but they're going to be able to get, to animals. And that's very, very, very cool. And, a lot of times, in these games, when we see pet classes, they aren't very good, but they've got a lot of things built into this. And I love that there's whole mechanics of how you have to actually kind of role play out and do almost like an encounter for the huntsman to conquer and, dominate an animal, to soothe it and to, tame it and everything. And I think all that's very, very cool. But I also think it's very neat that the fact that they can just always on the lookout for different animals that it can tame. It's not like they're just going to tame this one thing. They're going to be constantly looking for more and more animals, which is very, very neat. They also get the track ability that we saw with the barbarian. Weapon mastery, they get to choose a weapon. I just see this being a bow character for me personally. If I were to play a huntsman, I'd want a bow or a spear or something like that. They get wilderness survival. They can also make traps. Now here is something interesting. Werewolf Slayer at 4th level huntsmen develop an aptitude to slay lycanthropes. Indeed, when men and women suffer the curse of the beast, huntsmen rise to stamp them out. I think this is great. When wielding silver or magical weapons versus lycanthropes, huntsmen gain all the benefits of the predator ability regardless of the advanced intelligence of the afflicted. I think that is awesome. Enlist henchmen at 6th level, melee expert at 7, and then lordship at 9, like we've seen with the other classes. So I love the fact that you've got, kind of a lycanthrope hunter kind of mixed in with this is very, very, very cool. I love the huntsman. I think it's a lot of fun. I think the fact that you can tame, the art here shows like a giant spider or something. Very, very cool. I've seen this at the table before. I want to see more of them. I think they're really, really good. Now, the Paladin is a class that for some people, it's really weird. Paladins at some tables are very popular, and at other tables, they are not. At our table, they're popular. I have one person in particular who loves to play Paladins, and I also love to play Paladins. I think the thing that I love about the Paladin, and you can play the Paladin as the hero or the anti-hero, but I love the fact that with this interesting pantheon of deities that we have in Hyperborea, having characters that kind of interact with that pantheon, I think is very, very interesting, which is why I like clerics and things as well. But the Paladin is a warrior. They have that knight feel to it, but they also have a sleeper ability that a lot of people don't realize how good it is when they're first looking at it. It is amazing, and I'll show you here in a second. All right, so for the Paladin, you need decent strength, dex, wisdom, and very high charisma, a 15 charisma. A lot of times that'll be a barrier to playing this character. A lot of people don't want to put a high stat into charisma, or they may not even roll that high. If you are fortunate enough to play a Paladin, do. There's a lot of reasons for it. They get a D10 hit points. They can use any weapon, any shield, any armor, and they get a +2 to all of their saves. It's not called Hardy here, it's called Divine Protection, but it's the same thing. So that's what they get. Now, they also get a +1 AC, both attacks made by evil creatures. Now, Fel Paladins, theirs is opposite. They get a +1 AC against good creatures. So just depending on which version you want to play. They get the extraordinary ability that we've seen with all the other fighters, and then they get healing hands, or lay on hands, as we're also used to it called. All right. So this is when you first read it, you're like, you restore up to 2 hit points per day per level of experience. Healing in this game, it kind of comes at a premium. Like, there's not a lot of it, and it's kind of hard to get. So the fact that every day you can heal a little bit, so, at third level you get 6 points, it's enough to kind of keep a party, like, bring somebody up from almost being dead or whatnot. It's the second version of this that is hugely powerful. The paladin can also cure disease once every 7 days. Okay. A lot of people look at this and they go, oh, no big deal. Because if you're coming over from like a 5th edition or something like that, a D&D, what you're seeing is you don't see disease being that big a deal that often. Hyperborea is a different animal. Disease is awful. And a lot of times it can end in death. So having someone on hand that can, get you one get out of jail free card on cure disease once per week is huge. Absolutely huge. So I highly recommend looking at a paladin just for that ability. They get the honor, which is something what we saw similar to the cataphract. Also, they get horsemanship. Sense evil. Now, sense evil is interesting because what it does is that they can always sense like the presence of evil. Now, in my games, I give them like a pretty huge radar. In this, they can sense the dominion of evil in a 60-foot range. And then the Fell Paladin is opposite. It's good. Now, I feel that with this, I increased the range on this for my game personally because I liked the idea of just like this, hey, you sense some ominous evil in the great distance kind of thing. Rules as written at 60 feet. It's still extremely good, but I think this is a tool for the DM to kind of like telegraph certain things, to have that divine presence where maybe Apollo or whatever deity they are believing in is kind of giving them a little extra information. So I would encourage DMs to maybe expand this slightly whenever you need it, to kind of like help tell the party, something big is coming. It's fun. But 60-foot range is huge, particularly in dungeons. 60 feet's a lot. But when you're out in the wild, 60 feet can be, maybe you want to tell them that something ominous is in the bay or on the mountains ahead. Just fun. Those are fun things to do. All right, so they Valiant Resolve. They're immune to the effects of magically induced fear. They get the weapon mastery that we saw a lot of other people get. And then they also get Righteous Wrath at 3rd level. Now, this ability is very, very good. Basically, if you make a charging attack, it gets a +2 bonus normally. However, it moves up a lot. It moves up a little bit more as a paladin goes. So anybody can charge, but the Righteous Wrath makes the charge attack for a paladin better. They gain damage bonus equal to their level of experience. So at 3rd level, instead of +2, it would go up to +3. And then, now when mounted, this bonus is in addition to the double damage inflicted by a lance. So a paladin with a lance with Righteous Wrath is gross. At 5th level, they get Sacred Mount. At 5th level, they also can turn undead. They get their Enlist Henchman at 6th, Melee Expert at 7th. And then at 7th, they also get Scroll Use, and they do get limited sorcery ability they do pick up some spells from the Cleric spell list, which is very, very interesting. So you're gonna see a character that is, kind of a hybrid in the fact that he can cast some spells, but he's also a very, very good fighter. So I highly recommend a paladin, and I also think that having a wholly, upstanding character in the absolute savage, brutal world of Hyperborea makes this for some pretty interesting stories. All right, so moving on now, we go to the Ranger. First off, I want to say I love this art because there's a giant crab man in the back that's been felled by the Ranger, so I love the art, so shout out to that. All right, so the Ranger is another one of these classes that I love to see. I haven't seen a Ranger at the table yet. I want to see one really badly because I love Rangers, and all the way going back to 2nd edition D&D, I love Rangers. So a Ranger, you need a strength of 9, dex 9, intelligence 9, wisdom of 9. So pretty easy to get into. They can use any armor, shield, or weapon. They get a +2 to death and transformation saving throws. Now, alertness. They reduce by 1 the surprise, something we saw with the barbarian. They also get the ambusher ability, so you're seeing a lot of overlap. So One of the things is if you see an ability that you like, there may be a couple of different class options that have that ability that you like. They can climb, they can hide, move silently, you get the extraordinary ability. So all of these are kind of lining up with something we saw with like the barbarians. They get the track. They also can conceal their tracks. And they also get the ability to negotiate natural overgrowth with traverse overgrowth. So they can, move through the woods extremely quickly. They get wilderness survival. And they also, at 7th level, they do pick up the ability to cast druid spells. And also, if you look, it's very interesting. It alternates between druid and magician. So it's very interesting how these things kind of move back and forth, where he can cast a little bit of everything. Now, what's interesting is at 12th level, a level 3 magician spell is Fireball. So that is interesting that you could actually capstone a ranger casting Fireball. It's very, very cool. All right, so this is very interesting because it's kind of a mix between a druid and it also has like these barbarian abilities. So I think it's very, very cool. And I like the fact that they do get, different types of spells. They'll get a little bit of druid, a little bit of magician spells, which is very, very cool. Of course, their fighting ability goes up the same every level like we've seen everybody else. So I think Rangers are very, very cool in the fact that they can do a little bit of everything, but they also pick up, in the mid-game, they get some interesting spell options as well. All right, finally we go to the Warlock. Now, Warlocks are pretty popular. I've seen a couple at the table. They're a lot of fun. This is your true old school fighter wizard. So basically, you're going to need really good intelligence and strength, 12 on both, to play this. It does say that if you want to play a Death Soldier, Fire Lord, or Ice Lord, because they have different variations of this, you need a Wisdom of 12 as well. Warlock is one of those classes that is very, very flexible. And there's a lot of different ways that you can play a Warlock based on what type of spell list that you select. We'll get to that in a second. Alright, so they can use light and medium armor. They can use any shield, any weapon. They get +2 to transformation and +2 to sorcery. So they don't get the +2 to death saves that we see with everybody else, but they do get the sorcery. They pick up extraordinary. They can use magic items and read magic. So they get some of the things that we see with like a magician. They can also use scrolls. They can write scrolls, and they can cast spells at level 1. So starting at level 1, they can cast spells. Now, one thing I do want to note, this is a character that levels pretty slow. 3,000. If you remember, the fighter needed 2,000 to get to level 2. The Warlock needs 3,000. I mean, that's a lot. Their hit points are also the lowest of all the fighters. It's only a D8. So they're a little bit more fragile. They level up slower, but they're also, it's almost like you're leveling 2 classes at once. Their fighting ability and their casting ability go up at the same level. So it's not like they're not as good a fighter as a paladin. They may have fewer hit points, but they can fight just as good as a paladin. But they also have really, really good spells as well. So it's very interesting that they can do a bit of both. They get weapon mastery like we see, enlist hitchmen, all of that we see normally. Now here's the thing that's interesting. A Warlock begins with a spellbook that contains 1 level 1 spell selected from Magician, Cryomancer, Necromancer, or Pyromancer spell list. Okay? Depending on which school was selected at character creation. Though through personal research, the Warlock develops 1 new spell at each level gained. Each is learned automatically with no need of qualification roll, but it must be of a castable level. Any additional spells may be learned outside of level training, but the process is more arduous. Okay. So you have to kind of pick what you want to get into, and there's a lot of very interesting ideas on what you do. So let's take a look at a couple of ideas, because, you could make a Necromancer Warlock, you could make a Cryomancer. I think, there's a lot of really cool ideas. So let's do this. Let's go and take a look at a couple of the spell list and see what we can figure out of what I would suggest. So let's say you went to Cryomancer, and at level 1, you could pick up, Shield. I have a really good defensive spell. Or if you wanted something like, Magic Ice Dart or something like that, you could. Having Identify is not a bad idea either. All of those are pretty solid. If you went down to Necromancer, you could have Animate Carrion. You could actually have some type of animation spell to go at level 1, which could be very, very interesting. What else could we do? At Pyromancer, you could start the game with Burning Hands. I think Burning Hands for a warrior would be really, really cool. Although, to be honest, the spell list that I like, I think it'd be interesting to play it as a straight magician. because you could get spider climb. And I think a fighter like class with spider climb at level 1 could be very, very fun. I think that'd be pretty cool. I also like the idea that maybe they could take something at 2nd level like invisibility, which you could pick up with the magician as well. So the fact that they could, move into having like, spider climb and invisibility on a fighter class could be really cool. So anyway, a lot of cool ideas that we could do with a warlock. So what are you excited to see in Hyperborea 3rd edition? I personally am really excited to see a cataphract. I also think a warlock that can cast like spider climb and invisibility sounds really, really fun. If you like this kind of content, be sure to like, subscribe to the channel. You can also join our Discord. And until next time, let's keep rolling with advantage. Thanks.